Why are Fortnite pros so frustrated with the new reload meta? Today I'm discussing the Reload Elite Series heats. I'll talk about all the big names that qualified for finals and why it is they did so well. I'll also mention all the huge names that didn't qualify, including Mr. Savage, Shark, Vico, all of that and more in the EU review. So if you're not yet aware, the Reload meta definitely has some flaws. We recently moved away from the Slurp Rush map for competitive. We are now playing on the Elite Stronghold map, and with that has come some completely new items, the main one being the Cube Rifle, which is fair to say is not the pros' favourite item. As you can see, it's super broken, it's incredibly frustrating to play against, and it definitely lowered the skill gap across all 4 heats. The Cube Rifle has this splash damage attack which is impossible to counter, and as you can see, when pros are on height using the item, there's very little you can do about it. As well as this, the cluster cannon is in the game, it functions a little bit like an RPG. Splatting was also randomly enabled. This was only meant to be in pub games, not in competitive, but for some reason players weren't dying to full damage. Instead, they were splatting on the floor, dropping to 1 HP, and then being promptly finished. Definitely a very weird quirk of this tournament. And because of all this chaos and carnage, it does make sense that a lot of big pro duos missed out, and we'll get into that in just a second. Let's start off with Heat 1 though. In each heat we had 20 duos, and the top 5 made it through to finals, and the first place team in this heat was Dom and Demush. Now they played excellently throughout the whole tournament. I mean, take a look at this solo clutch from Dom. It is ridiculous. These guys are such an underrated team. What I love from Dom here is how he gets the knock onto Frostroki. He tries to box him up, but he's unable to, and then he doesn't overcommit. He recognizes that if he keeps going for the body, it may be a danger to him. He just sits tight, plays his game out, and secures the victory royale. Now listen, these guys have been super good at reload over the past few weeks. They of course won the play-ins round. They seem to be adapting well to the new meta, to the new map, and as you're going to find out later on when I give you my predictions for finals, I have very big expectations for them. Dom especially was great throughout this tournament. He had the most eliminations and the most damage in his heat. In terms of the other teams to make it through, we had the fellow Polish duo of Seti and Kombek, as well as Kantry and Finchik, Kiro and Frostroki, and Nebs and Nathan. So a lot of big names making it through this heat. However, this was the heat with a huge amount of pro players missing out. I mean, just take a look at this list. No Vico and Malabuka, no Savage and Velo, Shark and Teeny, the back-to-back Reload Elite Series champions, will not be featuring in the finals. I mean, at a certain point when all these big duos are missing out, you definitely have to take a look at the meta, because this should not be the way. Yes, they didn't put in the craziest performances. Yes, they weren't exactly at their best, but we want to see these big duos in finals. Savage and Velo had a pretty miserable time. As you can see, this clip of Savage getting absolutely annihilated by the Cube Rifle was kind of what it was like for the entire tournament. Not very fun for them. Vico and Malabuka didn't have a great time either, and Shark and Teeny got very unfortunate. They didn't get into 2 of their games. Yes, they weren't exactly playing their finest Fortnite, but the circumstances surrounding them were very unlucky, and it is a shame that they won't be in finals. Now, Heat 2 was a little bit different. We had all the big duos make it through as expected. I actually predicted this one spot on. I got 5 out of 5 right, which I'm super happy with. As you can see, Akira and Karama have made it, as have Kami and Hari, Church and Repairs, Chino and Pablo, and Kashi and Fyron. So a lot of top duos going through. Interestingly, Chino and Pablo, one of only 2 LAN qualified teams that have made it to these finals. And as you'll see later on, that means that teams will have to get very high finishes in order to qualify for the Reload LAN in Saudi Arabia or Paris, depending on what happens. We did have a couple of teams miss out here too, Belusi and Zangi, Haris and Skavi, Moneymaker and Fenoyan, but ultimately this heat went about as expected. Moving on over to Heat 3, we had Klapsi and Kjeld take the win. Definitely not what I was expecting. They very much mirrored the playstyle of their Danish compatriots Sky and Scroll, bossing it from the low ground, looking really strong. A very successful tournament for them, and I'm interested to see if they can replicate that kind of performance in the finals. We also had Reason and Noah make it through. They have really grasped the meta quickly. Every single game they were abusing the Cube Rifle, sitting on height, farming kills. It's no shocks to see them in the finals. We had King Cringe and Twy make it through, as did Podesai and Sato, and Swizzy and Pixie, the subject of my last video, have officially qualified. Listen, if you missed the last video, I'd go back and watch it because I talk about these guys in a lot of depth. But in summary, their form has really turned around lately. They of course came first in the Reload Elite Series Opens, first on day 1 of the play-ins. They're really finding their feet after struggling for a while. Stay tuned to see where I put them in my predictions. Now, this heat did have a lot of big teams miss out, the most notable one being Chap and Flixie, and honestly, no real shocks here. Their performances lately have been pretty subpar, and if it wasn't for the fact that they've qualified for the Summit LAN together, I genuinely think they would have split quite some time ago. go. It's really interesting because coming into the Reload Elite Series, before we'd even had the first qualifier, I was talking these guys up as one of the best teams for Reload. They won the Reload PlayStation Cup back during the Simpsons season. They were looking like they'd really figured out the mode, and it just hasn't panned out like that at all. Yes, they made finals last time, but they finished in 17th place. Now they haven't even got to that stage. It's just been poor from these guys. And the reason why I talk about them in this way is because I know they're capable of so much more. We've all seen the quality they have. We know that Chap is an incredible fighter. We know that Flixie is one of the best all-round players in the game. They should be doing way better than this. And if it does mean that they have to split and pick up new options just to do better, then so be it. Heat 4 was won by none other than the best duo in the world, Sky and Scroll. They had the most points out of any team across all the 4 heats. They were absolutely dominant. I could sit here and analyze all their games, but honestly, I think you already know what the script was. They split Elite Armory with Focus and Thomas HD. That gave them a great setup into the mid game. They were sensible. They did look for a couple of fights, but they didn't overcommit too much. They made it through to the end games, and that's where they became low ground demons. They were absolutely popping off. They would elevate to the mid ground if it got too congested. They're very good at timing those layer changes. They weren't afraid to frag out either, and this ultimately led them to a dominant win. Special shout out to Scroll as well. He was great from an individual standpoint. He had the most damage and the most eliminations in his heat. 42 kills is remarkable. That was 17 higher than the player in second, which was his own teammate Sky. Like Chino and Pablo, they have also already qualified for the EWC LAN, meaning that only 2 out of the 6 teams that have already qualified are in these finals. So it's going to be very difficult for teams to make it through. In terms of the other duos that qualified from this heat, we had Ping and Wox, Skyjump and Mumsy, Refsguard and Sanguild, and then of course Focus and Thomas HD. Interestingly, this will be their first Reload finals as a duo. They haven't made it out of heats in either of the previous 2. Let's see if they can put in a performance. In terms of duos that missed out, there weren't too many in this heat. Most of the expected names made it through. Pixovsky and Seren, perhaps the only one having a disappointing performance, coming in 17th. So let's get into my predictions for the finals. To reiterate one more time, it is the top 3 duos that will qualify for the Reload Elite Series LAN in Saudi Arabia. Because Sky and Scroll and Chino and Pablo are already in this lobby and they have already made it, though, it's fairly likely it could end up being the top 4 teams or the top 5 teams. But anyway, let's get straight into it. Picking the teams from 6th to 10th was pretty difficult. There's not a huge amount that separates them. I've gone for Cammy and Hari in 10th place. They haven't been getting the crazy finals placements as of late, but they do still have a lot of quality. I've gone for Skyjump and Mumsy in 9th place, followed by Church and Repairs in 8th, King Cringe and Twy in 7th, and then in the last spot outside of the qualification range, I've got Hero and Forstroki in 6th. But with all of those duos I've just mentioned, there is a very realistic path for them to qualify for the LAN. Now we're into the top 5, and I'm predicting all these duos to qualify for the EWC LAN if they haven't already. In 5th place, I've gone for Focus and Thomas HD. The reason I haven't put them higher is because we just haven't seen what they're like in these Reload set lobby finals, as this is their first one, so I can't realistically put them any higher than 5th. In 4th place, I've gone for Chino and Pablo Wingu. These guys are tried and tested in the Reload Elite Series. They've had strong placements in both of the previous qualifiers, and there's no reason why they're not going to continue that record in these finals. In 3rd place, I've gone for Swizzy and Pixie. I really like their drop spot. They're uncontested in chiseled cubes right in the middle of the map. Yes, the elevation there isn't great. Yes, they are at risk of getting lurked on by teams because they are so low on the map. But listen, it is still a mid-map POI. They are still one of the best duos in the world on paper. They're really turning it around at the moment, and I believe they're going to continue that with a 3rd place. In 2nd, I've gone for Dharm and Demush. Now, I spoke about them at the top of the video, so I don't need to justify this too much. They're looking great in Reload. They've got a huge amount of fighting power. They're a top duo, one of the best on the whole region, and there's no reason why they can't win it, apart from the fact that Sky and Scroll are in this lobby. And because they're in this lobby, they are the clear favourites to win. They're going to be splitting Elite Armory again with Focus and Thomas HD, which is such a favourable off-spawn situation because they don't have to worry about getting fought, about getting keyed. They can just loot up and get on with their game, and we've seen in the past that Sky and Scroll have a huge amount of quality in Reload. Yes, they actually didn't make the last finals, but they of course qualified for the LAN at the first time of asking. They're the best duo in the world for a reason. The EU FNCS champions are my pick to win the Reload Elite Series qualifier 3. Just to finish off, a couple of brief things about the Eval Cup that we had on Thursday, because it ended up being kind of an interesting tournament. Firstly, we had Shark and Teeny win a game, despite the fact that Teeny played both the Opens and the Finals on keyboard and mouse. That's right, his controller broke, so he wasn't even playing on his main input, but they still managed to win a game, which is pretty impressive. Mr. Savage and Velo also had a very turbulent tournament. It started out pretty badly, they died early off spawn, the vibes were really bad, they turned their comms off on stream, they weren't even talking to each other. They were able to recover and qualify for finals on EU, but it was over on NA Central where they had most of their success, because they were able to qualify for finals and then beat Peterbot and Poyo off spawn at Squibbly Shores, playing on about 140 ping. Incredibly impressive stuff. Yes, they didn't get a high placement in those finals, but you can't take that moment away from them. Subscribe to stay up to date with European Fortnite news. Thank you very much for watching the video. See you in the next one.